Shall we gather at the river, where our angels feed the throne, with its crystal tide forever, flowing before the throne of God. Yes, we'll gather at the river, the beautiful river. Gather with the saints at the river that flows by the throne of God. On the margin of the river, washing up in silver spray, we will walk and worship God on the happy golden day. Yes, we'll gather at the river, the beautiful river. Gather with the saints at the river that flows by the throne of God. Where we reach the shining river, where we every burden down. Grace our spirits will deliver and provide our love and love. Yes, we'll gather at the river, the beautiful river. Gather with the saints at the river that flows by the throne of God. Soon we'll reach the shining river, soon our pilgrimage will see. Soon our happy hearts will quiver with the melody of peace. Yes, we'll gather at the river, the beautiful river. Gather with the saints at the river that flows through the throne of God.
Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for that extremely blessed meeting this morning about methodology and rules and interpretation. We thank you for helping us to increase in knowledge step by step the more we try to grapple with these things and don't give up. Lord, help us to never give up in trying to understand these lines that you've prepared for us, and help us to gain the victory over our own weak minds to be able to understand these truths that you prepared for us, and help these things to change our brains and how they function, and help us to constantly be thinking like you and understanding like you the world around us. Lord, we ask a blessing on the messages we're about to receive next. We ask that you continue to help us to understand these lines and histories that are opening up and are here to strengthen our faith when we see different things happen. We thank you for the work that you've done in every one of us to step up and learn and teach and help others around us. And we ask that you continue to do this work in us. We thank you and we pray all this in the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Okay, we're going to continue on through Midway. Let me pull the notes up, the slideshow up. Okay, so everybody, you guys monitor the chat because I won't be able to when I got the slideshow up. Okay, so we're going to go through part 2 of Midway, and you know, I'm probably way behind a lot of people, But I'm really blessed by, in one of the slides in the second presentation, I put a couple of images in there that just were on my mind. When it comes to the frames of a movie, that's what this reminds me of. The line upon line and all that, all these different stories, they're like frames in a movie. And they're scattered, all these frames are scattered all over the places. They're various stories, right? And that then when you put the frames all in their right place, you play this movie and you see it, and all these dots start to connect and you start to better understand. So it's been a real blessing to, and it was last week after we finished Midway Part 1 when Sister Adriana put up the, I don't remember what study it was, you put it up there, but it's out of In God We Trust, I think, and which is our second study this afternoon. And it was like, at that moment, it was kind of like registering in me, okay, that was a piece, and I understood it as its singular piece. And I'm understanding Midway somewhat as its singular piece. But in then going through these studies, it's like they're putting together and connecting all the dots, and the Lord is blessing to, we were talking on our break too, how He's given us all this time to put together these things in our own understanding, for us to individually understand, for those of us that have hung on, and I pray that we continue to hang on every step of the way. So in the last study, we looked at Daniel chapter 5 and the many, many tickle you farson. We started to look at the currencies that were used. And if you go to eSword, you look up that verse, many, many tickle you farson, that verse in Daniel chapter 5, you look at the Greek or the Hebrew, the New Testament or the Old Testament, you won't find a good answer in Strong's, and there, it's not very helpful in this. There are verses in the passages, and maybe somebody remembers, I think we talked about it last week. I know that Ezekiel, I think it's Ezekiel 45 is where you get the 60, but I'm pretty sure you get the 50 as well from, but to get it to where you start to understand the measurements and stuff, go to, she says you want to use Brown Driver Briggs or Hastings. When you're in eSword, you can download those particular books, and they'll give you those currencies or values. And there may be other good sources as well, or a combination of sources. So depending on the region that you lived in, I guess you go back to geography on that one, depending on the region in which you lived, we looked at the many, many tickle you farson. There are many, many tickle you farson. And we found that the many could equal 50, and that there are two, many, many, there's two of them. And the tekel is equal to 1, and the upharsin means to be divided, which is why Daniel says your kingdom is divided. It's half a many, so it's 25. And with this calculation, you end up with 126. So you have the 50, two of them, two 50s. Tekel is 1, upharsin is divided, so you add them up and you get 126. So in some regions, the many isn't equal to 50, but rather it's equal to 60. And there's also two of them, many, many tickle upharsin, one tekel, which is just 1, and upharsin, which is divided, so it's 30. So you would take the 60, 60, the 1, and the 30, and it comes to 151. Those are two symbols that we can draw from the 2520 and have special importance for our time. So they become symbols. The 126 and the 151 become symbols of the 2520. And just a little side note too, is we're heading to Jericho after Jordan. We're getting ready to cross the Jordan, and then we head to Jericho. There's a lot to be gleaned from that 7 times that they marched around the city. And I don't remember if that was discussed, and I have to go back through the Germany presentations myself too, but there's a reason that they do what they do 7 times. So,
May I?
Yeah,
May
go
I-
ahead.
So something just came to my mind, and it like clicked something. I'm like, okay, like how did he figure that out? You know, how did he say, you know, you're weighed in the balance and you're found wanting, right?
Yeah.
Well, many is 50-50, right? Or 60-60, but they're equal on both sides. So it's showing a weighing, a half and a half, a weighing, and then the tekel is 1 unit. So that's your whole nation. Upharsin is divided. So your whole nation has been divided after it's been weighed.
So 50-50.
Wow, that is what it was. That's the
Wow.
message, right? That's the message that Daniel gave to him. The real message of what that meant, the literal message. That's what it was.
And you know what? With you saying that, maybe this is what you meant, but it takes me to another thought of what we're going to see. I think it's in the next study. When it comes to, I want to say it was 1782, is that the right date? Where they had e pluribus unum. I never really understood this, but out of many
One.
or one. So you have, and the many was the states.
Yeah.
Right?
The one government.
And the one government. And so you're going to get a many, many tickle your farson. There's many, if that's what she's talking about, and they're divided. Is that right? You have many states, one government, and you're divided. Am I getting that wrong? Adriana's looking at me with a puzzled face.
It sounds like it matches.
Just a thought as we go through.
Another thought, if I may. 50-50 is Laodicea because not hot, not cold. It's just 50-50 in between.
Yeah.
And that's what Belshazzar was.
But
He was
it's
Laodicea.
interesting when you think about our elections and how close they have been over the years, right? Over the recent years. Divided. We're divided.
Yeah, but I don't know if you can apply many as in the language word to many as in many states and many.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
But the
definitely we're
concept
divided.
is, yeah,
Definitely they're going to get the message that we're divided.
on two sides.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sister Christine. That was really good because
It was all the light of God because he just put it on my heart to say it out loud, and obviously it came from him to because all of us got it as soon as I said it. So it was definitely God.
It delighted more light.
Yeah. Yep. So that's what Medo-Persia was given, is that you're divided. Let's see.
Brother Jonathan says that Sister Christina made a good point too. 50-50 equals Laodicean condition. I think that's what she was saying.
Yeah.
That's what. Yeah.
Yeah. So these are the 126 and the 151 are symbols of the 2520. They have special importance for our time. We see how the 126 takes us to 1989, the same way the 1260 takes you to 1798. Everybody follow that? I don't have that drawn out here, but so the 1260 ended in 1798, which is marking a time of the end. The 126 takes you as well to 1989, which is marking the time of the end. Even though Ellen White doesn't have the same forward view that Paul has, and this is referring back to the previous study in 2 Thessalonians, they're basically saying the same thing, that we're not in a period to proclaim time for the second advent. At that time, they weren't. So after the 1260, William Miller could proclaim time because the book of Daniel had been unsealed and those prophecies were ready to be understood that led to 1844. So looking at that, so William Miller could proclaim time. We understand that there's an increase of knowledge, but when does time enter the message?
2009.
No, rethink that. Rethink that.
Oh no, at the beginning, right?
At the very beginning.
At the very beginning.
At the very beginning.
Yeah, at the very
Though
beginning.
it's not understood, it takes time to develop. It's not understood.
Yeah.
That's going to help us that you got that. That's going to help us as we go through, because I was really wrestling with some of their dialogue and questions, the ones that we're struggling on, the whole midnight cry, Sunday love, midnight cry, close probation, and how you do that. So hopefully hold on to that thought, and it'll help us as we go forward in this one. Of when does time actually enter into the message? So after the 126 to 1989, the book of Daniel is unsealed, and again we have a message of time. It's predicted time. And she's referring to YouTube, the latter rain, and I believe I put the link in there so you'll see it, but I'm pretty sure it was Wales 2018. Yeah, it was December 23rd, 2018. The fifth line, this is Elder Parminder, and I think we're all familiar with the Wales presentations because Parminder was there and Jeff was there, and this is where they were beginning to discuss the two different models that we're teaching. Jeff is addressing two different models as well. I don't know if they addressed that point or if he addressed that point there, but it was starting to become seen. I don't recall if it was discussed there. So, so anyways, you can watch that video if you haven't already. He's showing how belief about no time is part of the wine of Babylon. So part of the doctrines that we imbibed was a belief that there is no time, there can be no time. And he tells us where that came from. So in the 1260, in the Counter-Reformation, the millennial doctrine was invented. That was really Satan's preparation for William Miller. So when William Miller was raised up and he started speaking about the judgment in the time of the Second Advent, Protestantism had positioned itself with the papacy and rejected his messages because of the millennial doctrine, which is that we need to have this 1,000-year period of peace, and you cannot have a time of the Second Advent. So when you've got this millennial doctrine that is involved with all the Protestants, that you're going to have 1,000 years of peace, their preconceived ideas are already there. And so they're already set that you can't have a message of time. So in Spirit of Prophecy, Volume 4, page 235, she gives the 3 deceptions of Satan through the Catholic Church. The first one is Sunday sacredness. The second one is the immortality of the soul. What you would say is spiritualism. But spiritualism was not the deception that Satan designed for God's people. Spiritualism was the deception that he designed for the world, not Adventism. The deception for Adventism was covetousness, which means to become content with this life and distracted with worldliness to forgive, and distracted with worldliness to forget our mission. Adventism does not have a problem with Sunday sacredness or in its straight definition of spiritualism. The deception designed by Satan was covetousness or worldliness, this millennium doctrine, that you're going to have 1,000 years of peace, even though they may not speak it, their actions show it. So just like the time of Miller, the Protestant churches opposed him because of the millennial doctrines, and Adventism opposes us because of time setting, because it's the same deception. It took us time as a movement to recognize this and come to terms with that.
What comes to my mind, time setting, because why they reject it is because you're calling them out that because they don't recognize that in accepting the millennial, and getting caught up in the world distracted, we're saying there's a time, and we're going to know when Christ is coming. And so it has to wake them up, from their stupor to say like, hey, we're not just living, as this world continuing on, and the cares of this life. It's about to happen, and God is revealing.
And we were supposed to know.
When.
We're supposed to know.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So we're now going to begin discussing time setting. It's impossible to understand 2019 without understanding and looking at 2014 and what 2014 can teach us about the time we're living in. In our previous study, we began to discuss 2014. In Millerite history, what waymark was 2014?
It was July 20th.
July 21st.
July 21st on the Millerite line. We can also connect it with the line of the 144,000. 2014 or July 21, as we're looking at the line of the 144,000,
Sunday law.
What do they become? They become the Sunday law.
Midpoint.
So at the Sunday law, what begins to happen? Keep in mind, going back to chapter 38 of the Great Controversy, which is how she wrote it to the people, to the general public, to the Gentiles. How did she write it? What happens at Sunday law?
The loud cry began.
Yeah.
And it starts at the Sunday law. It increases, then it swells into a loud cry, right? So we're looking at the line here of the 144,000. You see the Sunday law come. You get the loud cry that begins. It swells into a loud cry, and it's going to end in a close of probation. So it ends at the close of probation. So we take that to the Millerite history and lining it up with July 21, and we'll go into specifics on how you get there. July 21 is midnight or midway. Both of those words are used to describe what happened on July 21.
Can I
There's
ask
yeah, go
a
ahead.
question? Where she says the loud cry begins, it starts at Sunday law and increases, then swells into a loud cry until when? Is the loud cry just a cry at the beginning? Because how can a loud cry swell into a loud cry?
It goes based off of the message that starts,
Right.
and you have
know,
an increase of knowledge and a formalization, but that message is what you're crying out.
I get that.
Yeah.
I get the swelling, but I'm saying you're going from a loud cry to a loud cry, but but if you're going to
there's
cry,
another
it's
place
getting
where she
louder.
words it that it starts out soft and swells to a loud cry.
We messed up.
Okay,
So we messed up when we say that the loud cry is at the Sunday law. It's not at the Sunday law. The
It's the
idea of
message.
it starts. The
Yeah.
loud cry is where we actually put it.
Yeah.
Where it's not happening.
And she words it differently in other places. These are her words, but she words it differently. It
So
starts
it's a soft cry.
It's a soft cry.
and then it swells
Yeah,
into a loud
swells
cry.
to a
That's
loud
what
cry.
I was.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was.
So
Could it also mean that more people will be out there? I mean, we have little now, but more people will be on board. Maybe.
yeah, I used to always think that was pretty much what it was, but it's linked to the message as well. As the message increases in understanding and formalization, that it's also related to that being the loud cry, because you're getting more definite with what the message is being more complete. Just like it's 1798. So if you take if you take just the dispensation of July 21, right? They had a message all along, but now they have a very specific message, okay? And that specific message now is going to take them to a precise point. And so you go back to 1989, there's a message that begins, but it continues to develop. Okay, so we take that to the Millerite line. July 21 is midnight or midway. Were you going to say something? Did you say something? Is that you?
I did, but
Okay.
I said it gets stronger.
Yeah, it gets stronger.
As you get more evidence, it's stronger. That's why it's louder.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like an agitation, Parminder calls it. As the events long foretold are seen to be approaching, it swells into a loud cry. So as we see these signs, the combination of church and state approaching, it begins to swell.
Right. And so what we've been seeing since
Amen.
2014 within the movement is this agitation.
Yes.
And within the movement.
Yep.
So, and then taking that to the priest line, 24.
If I can just say,
Yeah.
Jeff, 2014, it started a little bit, but it kept increasing. If you guys remember back his presentations, he's like, you guys, we're right here at the waymark of midnight cry. We're just like, they kept drawing it on the line where our way, we were like so close. And we're like, we're getting closer, but everyone's like, well, we don't really know when that is. We don't really know what's happening. Da, da, da. But then Tess came out last year. She's like,
We were already in it.
here's the date. Yeah, it's happening. And so now you're like, we have a solid actual day for it, because we're always infinitely getting closer, but we never knew when it was, so we didn't know when we were actually going to get there. But then when she put a mark on it, everyone was like, all hands on deck, it's happening next year.
But the interesting thing is, when you look at it this way, it started at 2014.
Yeah. Yep.
And it was not understood. So it started at 2014.
They had an idea that we're really close, but
Mhm.
they didn't know how close until at the midnight cry, it was formalized, the loud cry, and the date was put on it, and it was ready to go.
Right.
Yeah.
And then everyone could scream.
Loud cry.
Yeah.
Loud cry.
Oh, Brother Jonathan says it was unsealed at 2014. They knew. Hold on, it just went off. Still they knew nothing. It was unsealed at 2014.
Yep.
Still they knew
Yep.
nothing.
Yeah.
Yep. So let's see. So July 21 is midnight or midway. There's a swelling leading to the Exeter camp meeting and leads to October 22nd, the close of probation. And then taking that to the priest line, 2014 begins a swelling up to 2018, which leads to 2019, the close of probation. We said July 21 is midnight. Why? Why is it midnight? And it was the first message that Samuel Snow gave.
It
Why?
was between April and October.
No, that's midway. That would be the answer to midway. Why is it midnight?
Oh, because 10
That's when
virgins.
Samuel Snow comes on the scene, which is
That's right. It's a 10 virgins.
Yeah. So why is it midnight? Where does the word midnight come from, and what parable does it come from?
Yeah, I know. I was following that, but I wasn't sure. It was like I got to that moment too. I want to say 2 versions or I was like thinking in my head, but because I
Well, what
wasn't
did they
sure where
say?
it was
What did
going.
they say in Boston? What did they first say? What does she say?
The bridegroom cometh.
Behold, the bridegroom cometh.
so
The 10 virgins.
so that midnight cry was made and it was heard. So in 2014, that's when the third angel's message arrived. And I forgot how Parminder does it, but in 2014, that's when Tess came on the scene.
He says that, but I'm pretty sure it was later. I think he means it from. I don't know how he meant that, but I'm pretty sure she comes later because she says she comes later.
Comes later, but when did Tess come into the movement? Was it 2000?
If anybody remembers, she says like 2015 or 16 or something.
Brother
after
Jonathan says 2014.
14 was it?
That's
Yeah.
the Bible conference too, but she didn't start like really studying, I don't think, until
later.
2017.
Yeah. So she comes on the scene, but she wasn't studying this right away.
So she was
Okay.
present in 2014, but the cry didn't begin to, or the formalization of the progression.
Well, yeah, and if you think about that, backing up just a little bit, when the message of time was given in 2012, it was out of mercy. God gave us this time here because the message was rejected. Go ahead, Adriana.
I have a question because we've done this a lot, and I just want to make sure, where are we getting the permission to separate them as 2 different waymarks?
To separate
Midnight and midnight cry.
We're not separating them as 2 different waymarks.
We put midnight at Sunday on the midnight cry.
Oh, midnight
later
and
on.
midnight cry. This is swelling. It's the swelling. I know that. I'm looking at something different that you're saying. I thought you midway and midnight. My mind was elsewhere.
Can you clarify what you were saying there? I didn't quite catch it. You guys seem to know what you're doing.
It's all the midnight cry.
No, but what did Adriana mean? The
What
separation.
I mean is at midnight is when the cry was made. The cry was made at midnight.
Mhm. And then it swelled to a loud cry.
Okay. But the midnight cry is supposed to be the loud cry. So at midnight, the cry was made. The loud cry was made. But
Well,
then
if you
have
want to put it that way, midnight was 2014. Did you know any of this in 2014?
that, all I'm saying is that we are splitting them up then.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we've done
And-
that for a long time.
So
Though.
she's
I'm asking why.
Why?
Based on what are we doing?
I believe based, maybe there are other reasons, but I believe based on the Millerite line.
Yes.
Based on the Millerite line, because in Boston is when it was first given, and it didn't gain a lot of power, and then it went to Concord, and then it went to Exeter. So it's all the midnight cry message, but it swelled into a loud cry. And at midnight it begins.
And also 2014 is the arrival of the third angel's message.
Yes.
So I think that's a component that you can line up with these other
On the
waymarks.
total level, you have again increase of knowledge, formalization.
Yes, you see the increase.
Yeah. So it comes from the Millerite line,
Okay.
and also Great Controversy, where it swells as well. But the Millerite line gives you the specific camp meetings. It's all the midnight cry. It just increases.
Yeah, every message that comes follows a certain pathway.
So why is it midnight? Comes from the parable of the 10 virgins, and we see that it's midnight. So in the parable of the 10 virgins, we see that in that story that it is midnight. So the virgins begin to be awoken because of the message of Samuel Snow at Boston. The waking up, July 21, leading then to August 15, Exeter. They see this as midnight in the parable of the 10 virgins. So that's why they call it midnight, okay? They also use the word midway. Why would we say midway?
Because it's midway before you get.
This is another line to look, or another piece of it to look at. So because it's between the arrival of the second angel's message and the close of probation. It's midway between April 19 and October 22nd, 1844. What happened on April 19? And it's midway to the day, what happened on, so it's precise here in the Millerite history, what happened on April 19th?
Disappointment.
The disappointment. In the 10 virgins, they marked as tarrying time. This is where the bridegroom tarried. And when he tarried, the virgins went to sleep. They sleep on April 19th and they awake at Boston when the cry begins to be made. So you've got April 19th, they're tarrying here. And then at July 21st is when the first cry goes, behold, the bridegroom cometh. And it's called Midway because it's midway between April 19th and October 22nd. It's midnight because of the parable of the 10 virgins. And that's how you're able to line up 2014, midnight, and Sunday law. They're all the same place. A couple of quotes that we want to use to show from Millerite writings, beginning with Ellen White and the Great Controversy in 398, paragraph 3. That which led to this movement was the discovery that the decree of Artaxerxes was for the restoration of Jerusalem, which formed the starting point for the period of 2300 days, went into effect in the autumn of the year BC 457, and not at the beginning of the year, as had been formerly believed. Reckoning from the autumn of 457, the 2300 years terminate in the autumn of 1844. When was it first thought that the 2300 days would end?
In April.
1843.
April 19. When was the first disappointment? That was April 19. At the end of the year 1843, so the last day of 1843 in the Jewish calendar, or is Kariite, am I going to say that right? I don't want to say it wrong. Kariite calendar, the last day was our April 18, 1844. That was the last day. When you go spring to spring, it was the end of the Jewish year 1843 when they first thought Christ would return. So on April 19th, there's a disappointment because he did not return. And then she says the autumn of the same year, she says the message is proclaimed. So that rather than in the spring, it's that in the autumn that the message is proclaimed, the coming of the bridegroom, midway between the first disappointment and the autumn of 1844, October being the autumn month, and midway we find July 21. She says at midnight there was a cry made. She begins with a verse in the paragraph, and the subject is the waking up of the virgins and the midnight cry, and she places that as midway, which is July 21. So I put the quote in there, while the bridegroom tarried, they all slumbered and slept. And at midnight, there was a cry made. So you got the tarrying time, now it's midnight, there's a cry that says, behold, the bridegroom cometh, go ye out to meet him. Then all those virgins arose and trimmed their lamps. In the summer of 1844, Adventists discovered the mistake in their former reckoning of the prophetic periods and settled upon the correct position. The 2300 days of Daniel 8:14, which all believed to extend to the second coming of Christ, had been thought to end in the spring of 1844, but it was now seen that this period extended to the autumn of the same year. And the minds of Adventists were fixed upon this point as the time for the Lord's appearing. The proclamation of this time message was another step in the fulfillment of the parable of the marriage, whose application to the experience of Adventists had already been clearly seen. As in the parable, the cry was raised at midnight, announcing the approach of the bridegroom. So in the fulfillment, midway between spring and 1844, when it was first supposed that the 2300 days would close, and the autumn of 1844, at which time it was afterward found that they were ready really to close, such a cry was raised. In the very words of Scripture, behold, the bridegroom cometh, go ye out to meet him. So can we understand how midway and midnight are the same point? Same way, Mark. Based on the parable of the 10 virgins and based on, lost my train of thought, huh? And based on the parable of the 10 virgins and based on what she's saying that and how it literally came to midway, the midpoint between April 19 and October 22nd. So it was both midnight and midway.
Yeah. I don't know if that, I think Elder Parmenter said the same thing. Or was that Sister Tess I heard? I don't know. I think it was her. I did hear that.
So the other quote we're going to just paraphrase by Joseph Bates in the Pioneer Writings. It's 1847, and the reference is there if you want to look it up. In these sentences, he's discussing the time period of April to October. He says the tarrying of the bridegroom was a 6-month period. It began on April 19 and ended October 22nd, but at midnight a cry began. He says the midnight of this dark time is about July 20th. So he's off by 1 day. And it says that Samuel Snow gave the true midnight cry in Boston. So we know that Boston in July 21 is where he gave this message. Okay, this is Joseph Bates saying about July 20th.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Brother Jonathan put everything that we are doing right now is still being done under slumber and sleep until November 9th. That's interesting.
I have to think about that.
No, because the cry was made last year, the midnight cry, the cry that the bridegroom
But
cometh.
if you look at this, it starts actually it started in 2014.
So
They arose and trimmed their lamps and began to proclaim, behold, the bridegroom cometh.
Yeah, they rose.
And it's
trimmed their
empowered
lamps.
at the midnight cry. And
Yeah.
a wonderful impetus is given to it.
It's empowered at the midnight cry? Okay, I thought we were still under.
I might have said that, or I might have used the wrong word, but there's more power to it. It's increasing in power.
I was thinking that we were still under the period where they were collecting the oil.
No, it doesn't
We're-
seem that way from the lines for the priests at least.
Yeah.
Because midnight is 2014, which is Sunday law, which is at midnight, a cry began to be made and it swelled. And then last year was completely empowered, and that everyone has been waking up and trimming their lamps.
I understand his question. It might even be a concern for people. What does it mean? And she just repeated it again. What does it mean to trim your lamps? Probably something that needs to be understood. So,
Does it mean refine?
because the lamp is the Bible, right?
Refine
Lamp
the
to your feet.
message?
So you're trimming your lamp. I don't know.
Refine.
Is the
refine it?
Bible or it's life?
That's interesting because like I guess I came in after the midnight cry, so I didn't gather any oil. I'm just trimming my lamp.
Yeah, we came in right on the edge of it, right at the very end of 2013. So yeah.
But you can't say that, because how are the Levites and Nethinims getting oil? They're not, if the Nethinims aren't reading their Bible, how are they getting oil, right?
Well,
God
but
is using different.
he's
Yeah.
using
He uses
different means for
different
them.
things, right.
Yeah.
No.
But he used, because we were all reading our Bibles too while we were in the SDA church or wherever we were, and we were seeing something's not right. We didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
Just like even people in this movement who had been here forever, they knew about as much as we did about what's actually coming.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make a difference.
Yeah.
As long as when that cry is made and you start to look at the evidence and understand it, and you know.
It's just interesting because the lines show us that it actually began in 2014.
So
But it's an increase of knowledge. It follows the same format. It's an increase of knowledge, and it swells into a loud cry. That's 2018, and it ends in a shut door, 2019.
So what's the cry?
Behold, the bridegroom cometh. It's a message of time. You have time on the message. What was the message in October in the Millerite line? What was the message of Boston? A time was put on it.
Wow, this just really it just a light bulb just went in my head, because when I think of the line of thought and you have a message there, that is whoa. But yeah, anyway.
So in the Millerite line, July 21, the midnight cry message was the message of time, the time that he's coming.
Yeah.
But remember that time actually was a part of the message all the way back to 1798.
Mm-hmm.
So he tried,
So the bridegroom is still tarrying, isn't he? That's really
according to the lines, the tarrying ended. That's what I thought was interesting. I've been thinking about this for the last few days. According to the lines, the tarrying ended at 2014.
Mm-hmm.
And we're in the period of behold the bridegroom cometh ever since 2014. Think about how far behind we are in God's mercy.
What does that mean though? If we do a Parminder thing and we think about what do you mean he's done tearing and he's coming?
Yeah.
Because that would be close of probation where he stands up and actually comes. So what's tearing?
Oh, I
Do you know what I'm
remember that
saying?
study on that.
He
though.
just did that recently.
Yeah,
I was
remember,
watching that.
Yeah, I watched that.
It was in
Yeah, I'm trying to
France, and he was
remember.
like, you have the house, you have the bridegroom, they're not at the house. When does he leave to come to the house? He leaves at close of probation.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
no, there was another study that went into that thought and it explained more. Dang.
Would it have to do with Joshua, the transition from Moses to Joshua when he comes to the battlefield? The captain of the Lord's host comes and he speaks directly to Joshua?
I don't
know.
I don't know because that's using two different models. And the
Yeah.
bridegroom cometh model, he stands up when he leaves where he's at to come get the bride.
But when you're looking at the different lines in the different dispensations,
Hang on. The close of probation in the parable is Matthew 25:10, where the door is shut. The bridegroom comes before the door is shut. So it says, while the bridegroom tarried, they all slumbered and slept. That's 25 verse 5. And then it says, at midnight, there was a cry made, behold, the bridegroom cometh. That would have been, I suppose, 2014. Then all the virgins arose and trimmed their lamps, and the foolish said unto the wise, give us of your oil, for our lamps are gone out. The wise answered, go get your own. And then while they went to buy, the bridegroom came, and they that were already went in with him into the marriage, the door was shut. So the door was shut after the midnight cry. And so the midnight cry has to be before, if the door is shutting on November 9th, then what you're saying is true. So 2014 would be when, is that what you're saying? 2014 is when the midnight cry was essentially unsealed, is what we'll call it.
yeah, but
No,
we-
that is right. Because I
Yeah.
keep forgetting close of probation is November 9th for us.
Mhm.
And the second, so he stands up at November 9th.
Not when he stands up, it's when he shuts the door in the parable. You're mixing
Oh,
you're
no,
mixing Daniel 12:1 into it.
sorry.
So when the door was shut, that's when the probation closes.
But
That's
the thing that people get tripped up on is that the door, there's a shut door message there. We have an advocate still until Daniel 12:1.
Yeah, no, I'm just speaking about,
Confuses people.
I'm not speaking about morally, I'm speaking about us prophetically in our
Yeah, I know, I knew you were. I was just making the point in case anybody was, because that question comes up a lot. What are you saying?
Yeah.
That November 9th, because we still have an advocate, because we like to think that come November 9, what if we mess up? What if we still have some problem, what have you, you know what I mean? And
So, oh, sorry. Who wants to speak?
I was just gonna make a comment and associate 2014. I'm looking here at Tessa's board work from Bible Conference number 2, and 2014 is associated with the shut door, with the path of the just. Their door is closed, and then 2019, the shut door is associated with Future for America and those who are on that side of the issue. So we see the shutting of the door at a midpoint in 2014, where Miller ceases to give the message, and Snow comes in and refines the message and begins to take over that work. And I know that's a different model and different structure, but
it makes sense because there was a shut door for the Protestants that came before the shut door for the Millerites.
yeah,
yes.
So that makes perfect sense.
were you going to say something too first?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. So when a door shuts, we're entering into the next door
Dispensation.
and that's the next door, right? Because we'll keep going,
Right.
and so when that door
Prayerfully.
shuts, amen, yeah. So when that door, that is a close of probation, but those who pass the test are going into the next dispensation or the next. What does that mean? Like when what does that mean when we travel through time on a line? So because it doesn't stop, it keeps going. But those who, what does that mean?
There's a lot of things, but I mean, what comes to my mind is things that I was looking at through these studies is that she's got it drawn on the board over there too, where the threading of the needle, the eye of the needle gets smaller and smaller and smaller. It's not our stuff. that our physical stuff that has to be gone. It's what's in the heart has to be gone. So we're going to come to a place like what we were talking about earlier with Joshua 7, that in Joshua 7 is after Jericho, before Ai, if that's how you say it, that there still were those that had covetousness in them. They tried to come through with something that doesn't fit through that door.
Oh, they try
That's in the
to
heart.
come in with their own garment.
They're still trying to come in with something of their own doing instead of trusting God and following him.
And that's our prejudices that we have to leave at this door before we go through it.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So that's what that means for us in going through the next door and determining. if
Because
we
there's
can
going to
go
be
the
something
next
else that'll
door.
hit us next time.
Yeah.
And
A
so
different-
none of them are the moral close of probation, because we're not even ready for the moral close of probation. That's why that's the last one, the Daniel 12:1.
Right.
God is helping us to shed things all along the way, so it's not one great big test at the very end. This message is so great because it's not what Adventism ever believed, and it has way more grace involved in it.
Way more
yeah.
mercy. Yeah.
Yeah, mercy.
And
Man.
there's-
It made me think about the mercy when just thinking that the message of time came in 2012, and look at what he gave us, and look at when, and we were talking earlier too. I don't know if we were connected when we were talking about it or not, where the Millerites had 3 months, right? From July 21 to October 22nd, they had those 3 months. The midnight crack. Well, actually, if you're gonna, let me back up and say that, because 2018 would be Exeter, right? Yeah, 2018 would be Exeter. So last year in 2018, we're at Exeter. We're right before the shut door. And look how much time he's given us from Exeter. So I said that wrong. Bless you. So I said that wrong earlier when I said it. They had from July 21 to October 22nd. We were at Exeter in 2018. And the Lord has given us a whole year to try to settle in, grapple with these things and settle into it. Because there are so many lines and so many, that's his mercy to just not say, hey, look, you should have had this back in 2012. You should have understood in 1989, and you didn't. But did he do that? He has given us this time to adjust, and he's given us, and it's also at the same time, because it is messages that hit the heart, that hit the preconceived ideas, that hit the prejudices and all that, it gives us an opportunity to let go of those things. That, okay, you've been carrying these for a long time. I've tried to show you this way, this way, this way, and this way, and you didn't get it. Now I'm going to show you the hard way. Are you going to get it? Or are you still going to hold on to it? And he is merciful to us. So literally from Exeter to, we're living between Exeter and November 9 then, right?
Exeter
Since 2018.
Exeter on October 22nd.
November 9 is October 22nd.
Why
Yeah.
don't you just, wouldn't it be Concord, Exeter and Concord?
Concord was
Oh,
2016.
sorry. Concord, Exeter. Oh, no.
Boston, Concord,
Boston.
Exeter.
Yeah, Boston,
Yeah.
Exeter.
Concord, Exeter.
In
Boston,
2018,
Concord,
Yeah.
no,
Alphabetical order, BCE.
Boston, Concord, Exeter.
and 2018 was Exeter. So he tried to give, he is in Samuel Snow, tried to give the message in this prior history, but no one was listening to him. But here people begin to embrace it. In Boston, they begin to embrace it. He says at midnight, in the parable of the 10 virgins, the cry was raised, which caused great excitement, and people have definite time. He's blending together the story of July with the parable of the 10 virgins. And that's the same thing that she did. Midway, midnight, the parable of the 10 virgins, same way mark. So he's blending them together. He says that a camp meeting was held in Concord, and that's this way mark here. This is one of the few where we have quotes or information on Concord. On the 1st of August, there was a camp meeting in Concord. He learned about all this afterwards. He says that here again, the cry sounded all through the camp. Then on the 12th of August, another camp meeting was held in Exeter. On his way to Exeter, he felt a strong impression that new light was going to come, which would give new impetus to the work. He said the hills rang with a midnight cry. So, and remember, the Midnight Cry began, according to this, July 21 in Boston. And he's on his way to Exeter, and he's having this strong impression. So there was this escalation from July 21 to August 15. It's described as midnight or midway, partly because of the parable of the 10 virgins, that really being the cause, but it's also true in reality that this is the midway or midpoint or midnight. This is one of the problems why for many months people were saying, why in this movement would we say midnight cry, Sunday law? Because midnight does not lead to Sunday law. It is Sunday law. So we say, and where do we get that it is Sunday law? How would we call midnight Sunday law? Where do we get that from?
Great controversy.
Great Controversy, chapter 38. So we say midnight cry, close of probation, and we can call Rapha and Panium midnight or midnight cry only because Sunday law is a close of probation. And if we remember Acts 27, that the Sunday law is a close of probation for what? What did you just
Adventist?
say? For the institutions,
No.
not the people, but the institutions, the United States and Adventism. So it is a close of probation, not for people. Sunday law is a close of probation for institutions, the institution of the United States and the institution of Adventism, but not for the people.
So 2014 is an external Sunday law because of what the religious right did with Cambridge Analytica, but internally it's a Sunday law based off of our lines with Midnight and Midnight Cry and the message being opened up.
Yeah.
For the priest, it's a Sunday law.
Say that one
Internally.
more time.
Externally, 2014 is a Sunday law because of what the religious right did to hire Cambridge Analytica to influence, bring church into state. Internally, it's a Sunday law because our waymarks show us that that's when a message was opened up for us to test us in this movement.
So otherwise, midnight is Sunday law.
They are the same, yeah.
So you've got these three, 2014, July 21, and on the line of the 144,000, Great Controversy, chapter 38, it's Sunday law. They're all the same. Concord is where it goes next, then to Exeter, then to close of probation. We know that Concord was 2016. We have then Exeter here at our 2018, or Heraclea as we know it as well, and then a close of probation in November 9. So
you needed Rapha and Panium in Daniel 11 to open up, and then you needed the agricultural model that Parminder did in Italy to open up with the 3 groups for us to see 2014, and then you needed
she
test.
says that as we get through here.
Yeah, then you need tests
That
to
you
come in
needed
and
all
put
these
it
things.
all. Yeah.
You needed all these things.
Can you expound on that a little bit more, Sister Adriana? On 2014 was the combination of church and state with Cambridge Analytica coming in and manipulating the elections through psychological warfare. Can you expound how that was so everyone here can understand that a little bit better on how illustrating church and state?
From my understanding, Cambridge Analytica is the gun for hire. It's a tool, but the people who use the tool is who we need to be looking at. Like Tess said, we need to look at Steve Bannon and Robert Mercer, these guys who are propelling forward this idea of a Judeo-Christian America who want to bring church together with state. They're the ones who hired this company to be able to do that. So that was their big initial huge step that they took to bring church in control of state and make Judeo-Christian America the America that they want.
Okay, got it.
And also some of that's going to be expanded on as we proceed today, whether this study or the next one. I think the next one, some of that will be more expanded on, although it's not those particular studies were done already in depth, but we are going to touch on it as we continue to go forward.
Because the motive of bringing in something like Cambridge Analytica was, the entire motive behind it was to bring Christian laws in charge of America, to bring something, a change about that would allow them to make America Christian again.
So it was a company that was used to psychologically manipulate the elections through social media and various other ways, but it was used to bring in Trump as one who could bring in church and state. And as you mentioned, Bannon and the other guy wanted the end result to be Donald Trump in power to bring church and state together. Is that
Yeah, because they were going to use whatever candidate they could that would propagate their ideas, because it didn't start with Trump first. It was the guy with what was his name? The first guy Cambridge Analytica backed in the election. Who, Ted Cruz, yes.
Yeah.
So Cambridge Analytica actually backed Ted Cruz first because he seemed like he was going to be the right-wing candidate that would bring in the evangelicals' belief system. But when he fell out, the next best thing, that guy who just popped up, was Donald Trump. So they immediately went behind him. So they were just looking for. So when the papacy was trying to find the king of the north in World War II, the Protestants are trying to find their king of the north in our war right now, and they did that.
Okay.
Question, because this keeps recurring in my mind with what you're saying. Because this goes back to the Civil War. The Civil War has things to teach us, and that's what we're going to be going through coming up in this study and the next study. So they needed somebody that would cause a revolution.
Maybe I don't know what,
because Ted Cruz may not have been the one to cause a revolution.
I don't know that was their initial thought process.
No, I'm not saying it was or not, but I'm looking at it from God's perspective. Is it because it had to be somebody that was going to bring about revolution?
Maybe.
Just question.
It could be. I mean, it's how it laid out. It probably was. I mean, it was going to have to be someone who laid out revolution, because you just had the thing that angered them was they were just in the reign of Obama. Obama just removed state and church from everything. He removed the prayer meeting. He removed all this stuff out of schools, and they got so angry. And you're probably right, because Steve Bannon has been known to say, I want to bring this country apart. I want to completely destroy this country. So it probably was. And so
Is he an American citizen?
I don't know.
Oh, I'm just wondering. Who does that?
Obama.
No,
No.
Steve Bannon.
Steve Bannon.
Why would that's treason?
I know, but
that would be treason.
that was their whole thing was, and that's what Tess was pointing out, is they were just in the reign of Obama, where he removed everything out of, and this is what it comes down to when she goes back to 2014, 151 years later, 2014, 63 years later, 2014, 220 years later. It goes back to a point where they're like, we're not recognizing God in our country, and that's why everything is falling apart. So in 2014, you have a bunch of stuff happening, and the religious writers saying, we're not, recognizing God, and we're taking him out of everywhere. And then you have Steve Bannon come in, and she says that he was in the Vatican trying to get help from them also, to say in 2014, saying America is a Christian nation and we're not acting like a Christian nation, and we need help to make America a Christian nation in 2014.
And many of these questions are in the second presentation.
Go on.
So those who created Cambridge Analytica created it with the intent to be used to combine church and state. Is that?
No, Alexander Nix made Cambridge Analytica. They were just using it as a psychological weapon to make money, finagle ideals of people in their brains. But all Cambridge Analytica is this tool that had already been existing. And I think Bannon already saw it work in Brexit, and he saw,
in Canada, I think.
Yeah. And so he's like, this is our tool. We're going to use this. We're going to hire
So it
these
became
guys.
the tool to unite church and state.
Yeah.
It was a tool that would be used to elect someone that would bring in church and state.
To manipulate the minds of the people.
To manipulate the minds. Okay, got it. Yeah, that's.
Because the other thing they did with Cambridge Analytica is they put ideals out into the, I don't want to say deep web, whatever, wherever they put, it was deep web. Yeah, in the media, to incline people's minds towards conservative ideals, towards building a wall, towards draining a swamp, towards doing all these things that bring in these evangelical ideals to bring in their institution. So it was just a tool.
And like I say, when we go through the next presentation after this one, you're going to see it a lot more clear. At least I sure did, as I putting it together and going along with it. It's just to see it goes all the way back to the Civil War when it first began.
Yeah.
So.
But that Midway one, the Romanian one, she goes into it. I think the Arkansas one, she probably had gone into it much, much deeper, but I can't find that video. It's probably in the office somewhere. But the 2014, as being a Sunday law, it really is a Sunday law. And if you weren't looking for it, you weren't going to see it because Satan was using information warfare to do it.
Yeah, and it goes as well, going back to the quotes where she talks about the Sunday law, that the accepting of the union of church and state, or the union of church and state is the acceptance of a spurious Sabbath. So when you were talking about themes and all that kind of stuff, so that you've got this church and state theme that has been going on from beginning back with the Republican Party and during the Civil War, this theme of the union of church and state, and it comes up in certain places in history, and it comes up in these waymarks, the 151, the 63, it comes up in these waymarks.
Yeah, and also the other issue that we had to confront when we're not seeing 2014 is the fact that we were looking at the wrong Babylon because we're still expecting something from the papacy. But the people who have been working in this country the whole time are the evangelicals. That's why when she came out with Falwell in 1989 and all these guys doing, it was supposed to open our eyes to the fact that the evangelicals have been working in secret behind closed doors where we weren't looking. So even if we were going to try to look for a combination of church and state for Sunday law, we wouldn't have seen it because we weren't looking at them, because we weren't looking at Protestants as Babylon before. We were looking at them as our friends and our future helpers.
It's interesting because I always question that in my own mind when you read The Great Controversy. Wait a second, who's she calling Babylon? Because I know I picked up a long time ago, she's not talking about the Catholic Church here. She's talking about the Protestants. And I saw that a long time ago, but never connected to all this. Yeah. You saw it too? Yeah, but never really connected to all this. So Babylon is not the Catholic Church. Babylon is the Protestants.
Yeah, because the beast, this is the issue. We have two beasts in Revelation 13. The first one, which was the papacy in charge of Europe, and then ours, where Protestants are in charge of America. But we don't look at Protestants in charge of America at the same scale as we see as clearly as we see the papacy in charge of Europe during the 1260. Right. But it is happening, and it's happening behind our eyes because we're not looking at it. And it is on the same level. They're making an image to that beast. It's going to look just like that. So,
and what I got out of this, going through these two presentations, putting them together, is that I understood more clearly when it comes to why it's not about morality. It's not about morality. It's about the freedom to choose. And when you unite church and state, you remove the people from the right to choose.
No, what did you? I got what you just said, but expand on the thought of that it's not about the moral; it's about the right to choose. So
the union of church and state removes your right to choose. Mm-hmm. They now are going to tell you what is morally right for them, what is morally right and wrong. It's really interesting when you think about it. Look at when they want to unite to bring back their prosperity. I got too many thoughts in my mind right now, and I don't want to mix them up. What were you going to say?
When you're talking about morality, you mean like the people on the left, their moral values? It's not about their moral values. It's about the decision of church and state. Is that what you're talking about?
When you unite church and state, you then become dictating what morality is, and you start making laws based on morality as opposed to civil laws only. You start making laws based on morality. So go ahead.
I was going to ask a question. So if you're protesting against gay marriage, you're actually inviting in the government to come in and straighten out the issue of morality, telling who to marry, not to marry. So that's an illustration of church and state coming together. So I think that's a key point there when referencing the marriage issue in our history, right? Which is, yeah.
So the waymark of midnight is itself Sunday law. This is where the virgins are awoken, the swelling of the cry that the bridegroom is coming and the shut door. To say midnight cry Sunday law is not accurate, because the waymarks of midnight and midnight cry are to prepare you for your close of probation. A question regarding the priest line. When we observe the Millerite line, we see this Boston camp meeting Samuel Snow is already trying to tell the people about October 22nd. But as far as I'm aware, and this is from someone in one of the students, as far as I'm aware, this message, and this kind of pertains to some of the questions we've already been talking about, this message that you're presenting wasn't there at 2014. There was no knowledge about November 9, or was there? So again, because what he's saying, if we're all following it, is the same thing that we're talking about here, is that 2014 is when it began. So if Samuel Snow's given a message on time in 2014, where's that message? How come we're not seeing November 9 back in 2014? That's his question. So we can take that problem right back to 1989. What I said, hold on to that thought earlier.
Yeah.
We can take that problem right back to 1989, or you could say 1818. What waymark is 1818 on the Millerite line? William Miller begins his studies in this history. He buys his concordance in 1798. From 1798 to 1818 is the increase of knowledge, which means Miller has his message in 1818. What is he saying in 1818? He's saying about 25 years until Christ comes back. He has a few details wrong. Probably they still need to work out some calculations, but the essence is there. So it takes you back all the way to the time of the end. The message of time takes you back all the way to the message to the time of the end. So then we go to 1989 to 1991, Daniel 11, 40 to 45, but we don't have information there on time about our close of probation, or even at 1996. So you're identifying three different differences between our line and the Millerite history, but the difference is all the way from the beginning. There are some differences. So some of this dialogue, I really struggled to put it into, to make it not sound confusing, because it was confusing listening to what they were saying. So I tried to split it up a little bit. So you're identifying the differences between our line and the Millerite history, but the difference is all the way back from the beginning. There are some differences between their line and ours. You could say that our message of time is a repeat of history, because we're saying the swelling of the loud cry is an increase of knowledge, and it's the same thing at the beginning of the Reform line. So we've gone through the dispensation studies. All of us have seen that. So each dispensation has an increase of knowledge, and it all involves a test, an increase of knowledge, a swelling to a loud cry, and then a shut door on that particular dispensation and that test, that prophetic test.
Increase, did you say increase of knowledge and the formalization?
And the formalization, yes. Yeah, thank you. So our Reform line begins and ends with a swelling. You can bring other lines to demonstrate the differences. For example, the waymark of 2014 is July 21. We can make it different dates in Millerite history. You can make it also 1846 and see the introduction of the Sabbath doctrine and how that progresses. So it would be an introduction or an increase of knowledge and then a swelling. So, and then that progresses. But when it comes to time, there are some differences. One of the main reasons for that is how we've taken on the doctrine during the 126, that there is no time. So when you go back to the 126, which is, I have to back it up, to the 126, 1863 to 1989, you're still imbibing the doctrines of Babylon, and that the message that there is no time.
And
so
can I say something about
yeah.
that? Because when Elder Parmenter was going through that, it made me think about that millennial thing, is that though they didn't claim to believe in that, the thought, that Protestant idea that no one knows the day nor the hour when Christ comes.
Stuck with it no matter what.
Yes, and that essence of not knowing time, or time not being revealed, was still with the Advent movement, or the Adventists. Yeah. So I just want to put that out there, because because Seventh-day Adventists to this day, they will say, we don't know when Christ is coming. How do you know? Did he say in the Bible when he was coming? They will say that.
Yeah.
And then you will also go to an evangelical Christian, or just a regular Protestant of a different denomination than Seventh-day Adventists, and they'll say the same thing. They'll say that no one knows the time when the Son of Man will come. No one knows the time except for God.
So we may have had a different view of it, but it still comes from the same doctrine.
The that one quote that they use from the Bible too, where no man knoweth the day or the hour, it was written in present tense.
Yeah.
It says no man knoweth because no one back then knew. They were already in their own dispensation coming to the end, their own end.
Yeah.
Amen.
That doesn't speak for future generations that no one will know the day or the hour.
Amen. And that brings me to the point that we discussed during the break, or that I brought up, was that each dispensation is different. Something that God said for that particular dispensation does not apply for our time. It's like the way they spoke or the way they dress is completely different than our time. It was a whole different dispensation. The way they understood things is completely different from our time. So God spoke to them in a different way, you know, so it applies differently to us now.
So this question continues to go on, trying to grapple with how 2014 is Sunday law, midnight, and midway. Okay, and I pulled up from a previous study as pertains to this particular conversation that's taken place, how she demonstrated, and I only took a small piece of it, how she demonstrated that within each dispensation, you always have an increase of knowledge, formalization, and it involves a test, and then it comes to the shut door. So each dispensation has this same pattern, this same repeating pattern. You know, it's really interesting because years ago, before I was even part of this message, I knew there were patterns in there, but I didn't understand the depths of it. I'm just thankful that he showed me that, because maybe if I didn't know that, I wouldn't be here today. You know what I mean? So I'm just thankful, because the only reason I know I'm here is because of him. And I pray to be here till the very end. What happened in 2014 internally? We can see that in 2012, the message is rejected. In 2014, what begins to happen? A shaking. The path of the just is leaving. And then when this is somebody else saying it, and then Tess interrupts and says, well, I thought that the midnight cry was meant to unite people. She kind of says it with a smile on her face. Think about it, because people think it's supposed to be a message that unites, right? So why did it cause a shaking?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You can't say that based off the 10 versions that it unites.
Yeah.
You had a split.
You had a split.
Five
But
wives
don't
and
they
five
all believe
boys.
that he's uniting? He's coming to unite us, not divide us? No, he comes with a sword, and that sword cuts and it divides.
See, that's people still misunderstanding the kingdom that he's bringing in, and those are the
Exactly.
people who end up falling away.
Exactly.
And when you take that to people and tell them that, they will have a different understanding. They don't know what that means when God causes the division, you know.
So what I saw in some people, none in this group here, but in some people that struggled with the fighting, etc. You know, it's like, and I learned a long time ago, you're going to really need a strong stomach to go all the way, because you're going to see people, and prayerfully, it's not your own self, because if it is your own self, you're not even going to know. You're just going to believe you're on the right side.
Peaceful warfare is an oxymoron, isn't it?
Right. So it is a message that divides at every step of the way. So also the beginning of the latter rain with Ezra 7:9. What do we learn from that? We see that the latter rain began regardless of the position of the people in the movement. So the rain came regardless of the people. We remember too that the rain falls on the just and the unjust, or the righteous and the unrighteous. I was trying to find those passages. Yeah, so that's Jeremiah, I think.
No, that's Matthew.
Well, it's also in the Old Testament, I'm pretty sure too.
Oh.
I want to say it's under righteousness and unrighteous. I can't remember, but I think it's in the Old Testament as well. So, but just phrased a different way. So the rain falls, and what is the rain for? To ripen harvest, right? So if you have wheat and tares and you can't tell the difference, so what is the rain doing? It's ripening both, which is why we're seeing what we see, because both sides are being ripened. The question is, why does our line look different than that of the Millerites? The question isn't really an issue of 2014 and 2018. It's an issue right back to the time of the end. That there is a difference. That there is a difference. They are proclaiming the message of time from the opening up of the time of the end, whereas for our message, based on the opening of Daniel 11:40-45, it had time built into it. So all the way back in 1989, it had time built into it. Had we understood the symbolism of the 2520 and the 126, it already had time built into it.
You know what? The Parmenter points out time of the end. time of the end. So there's already a time
Uh-huh.
there, you know, just
Time.
in the, yes, just
Time.
in it. Yeah.
Just
time
in the
of
name, just in the
yeah,
title,
yeah,
time.
just in the title.
So it took us more time to recognize the time element in Daniel 11, and this comes up to the point that somebody was making earlier. Go ahead.
Real quick, the other thing is that we didn't realize is that our whole history is a history of applications. None of it is literal, because the literal was supposed to be in Millerite time. So they had the true time of the end. They had the true everything, all the waymarks, because Jesus was supposed to come then. But what we're doing is in saying time of the end in 1989 is we're making an application.
It becomes a symbol.
Everything is a symbol and an
Yes,
application in our
exactly,
nine
a
times. So if they
symbol.
had time everywhere in their message, then we have to have a symbolic representation of time everywhere in ours. Otherwise, it doesn't match.
Amen. And we can't say it's a type or a type of, because, but that, yeah, it's a symbol.
So it took us more time to recognize the time element in Daniel 11. It took us time to recognize Raphia and Panium and those extra details that could give us 2019 in the first place. When we say that we repeat Millerite history to the very letter, we could argue against our interpretation of that. There are differences through each history, but that does not affect the structure. The number one difference to consider is failure and success. We can also see in their failure a mistake built in, and we've already looked at that, the differences between their history and our history. We've already recognized that there's differences at the waymark of October 22nd, because October 22nd, this I got a little bit confused on, so I'll ask your help on. And I went back and specifically watched the video again after I'd already done the notes and put the slideshow, when I was putting the slideshow together, because I'm gonna tell you what she said. And you guys help me, because I'm pretty sure that what she said was not what she was saying is wrong, but I think she used the wrong word. You know what I mean? By mistake? Okay. Because she said, we can also see in their failure a mistake. Let's see. Because October 22nd is 1945, and 2019, she said, is Panium. And I thought, wait a second, because I was drawing it out, and I was like, no, because 2019 is Raphia. So she had to have meant Raphia. There's no reason we would say Panium.
What else does she say? Keep going with that thought.
The reason I think that ours is different is because it's built on more lines than just the Millerites.
She's definitely referring to Raphia. Or what?
Well, she just said the reason why our lines are different
is because it's built on more lines than just the Millerites.
She's comparing our lines to the Millerites.
The line of the priests, we can place these waymarks, just 2014 as an example, on multiple levels. To draw the Millerite structure, it's July 21st. We can create another structure and see 1846 leading up to 1850, which was a loud cry. Go ahead.
What's she talking about 1945? Where'd she get that from?
She was looking at the closing of World War II, I believe, saying that October 22.
The counterfeit, the 46 years of the counterfeit. 1899 to 1945, which is 1798 to October 27.
But she didn't come out with that back in March, did she? When this study came out?
Is it talking about the end of World War II?
She did the counterfeit at that level way back at Fatima in October.
Did she, with the dates and everything for the counterfeit?
Yeah.
Okay.
1899 to 1945. Yeah.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah. She didn't elaborate, so I thought when she was using 1945, she was referring to World War II.
Yeah, it ends at Panium. 1945 waymark is at Panium.
So maybe she meant to say, maybe she didn't mean to say 2019.
Yeah, she couldn't have meant to say,
maybe that's what was wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, I know something was wrong there. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So that 2019 is supposed to be 2021 then?
Panium. The word Panium. It's supposed to be the word Panium.
She put a date. Or she put a year.
Yeah, she still uses
She used it
because October 22nd and 1945 were the close of a probation, weren't they? So 2019 is a close of probation. Panium is not a close of probation.
Yeah, well, there's definitely something not quite right here.
Three of those things have something in common, whereas Raphia doesn't, or Panium doesn't have in common with them. So it seems to me that Raphia and Panium would be the interchange, not 2019, because 2019 is October 22nd.
Panium is, I thought, was a close of probation for
Oh yeah,
the
he's
Levites.
right. He's right, because 2019 is October 22nd. And
Yeah.
that's what she was lining up. That's what she was lining up, October 22nd, 2019, and then 1945. She was putting them all together.
So then 1945 is out
It's
of
Rockville.
place.
Oh, wait.
Because 1945 is at Panium on the line.
Okay, well, maybe we'll just
Oh.
skip that, and anybody that wants to put it better together to figure out, because and you can go back and watch the video, because I know I listened to it like 4 times and kept backing up to catch, but she said that October, I think she actually had it written down, I don't remember, that October 22nd is 1945 and 2019 is she said Panium. So something's not right there, or I'm not understanding it.
And no one corrected her. So it's
No one
not
corrected her.
Yeah, so it's not like
No one corrected it.
yeah, she could correct it later.
So the thing is if you're saying October 22nd, 1945 and Panium, 1945 and Panium are in correct order. October 22nd isn't and 2019 isn't. So 2 things that are the same in one thing and 2 in the other, but not those 4 don't match together.
Yeah.
We have compare and contrast.
So we know there's a little missed something, but she's trying to make the overall point that regardless of that, the overall point and how there are differences in the lines, and how you can line up 2019 to 2014. I'm sorry, 2014 to Midnight Cry and Sunday Law. That's the overall question here that's going on. Theme, overall theme. And so there's definitely something wrong with that one particular spot. The reason I think ours is different is because it's built on more lines than just the Millerites. The line of the priest, we can place these waymarks, just 2014 as an example, on multiple levels. To draw the Millerite structure, it's July 21. We can create another structure and see 1846 leading up to 1850, which was the loud cry. Then you don't have the introduction of time, you have the introduction of the Sabbath. There's not a single reform line that's going to give us every single detail exactly the same, but we still trace pattern or structure.
Quick question. In that statement that you made where she made a mistake, she was saying that you can see differences between our lines. So I
Right.
think maybe she was right in saying that these don't actually match because there's differences. I don't know.
I don't know.
Wasn't that her point of saying that history of failure and success, there's differences or there's something?
Yeah, but I still don't get saying 2019 is Raffia when we know it's not.
No, it's
It's
Panium.
Panium.
Yeah.
You meant it's Panium.
Yeah, she said Panium. Thank you. Yes, she said 2019 is Panium. Thank you.
Do you know the time marker you had that at?
I looked it up last night because I had to go back and find it. I should have wrote it down. 40 to 45 minutes, somewhere in there.
Okay.
40 to 45 minutes. Maybe a little bit further, but somewhere around there. So the reason I just pulled this from a previous study, it wasn't to note the Boston Concord or the wars. It was just to put this structure of in between each dispensation, because that's where she's kind of going when she uses 1846 to 1850. You could go to the Millerite line and add that in as another dispensation, if I understood that correctly. So this continues to dialogue through on the same theme. So question, so is there also no specific message that started to be given at 2014 towards 2018? Is there no message that starts to be given? So
if you think about it as a structure of a message, little pillars of it started to be put up until you had the whole house at Midnight Cry.
but what's the main
Because it's-
objective?
Of
I
what?
guess it just depends on depends on your story,
Could be
right?
a couple
Depends
different.
on your story. So if you didn't get it at 2014, right? When we go to last week's study, I did my crazy artwork of trying to draw eyeballs. Okay. So the idea is that you can start to look forward.
Yeah.
Because we're here at 2018 looking back. So was there no specific message at 2014? Was there supposed to be? There was supposed to be, right?
I was just about to think about that, but Elder Parmenter was studying that all along, and he did have a message
And
on
he
time
did,
in
yes, he did.
2012. So was he one of the faithful who did know?
He did know.
Yeah.
And he was told by
But he
leadership
was told
to
to shut up. So
leadership told him to
be quiet. So
imagine he had to, try to put yourself in that place when you know it's right, and you're told by the leadership not to do it. How do you have to be guided by the Lord to know what to do. Go ahead,
So
we can see that thought rolling across your head.
when the leadership in the beginning in 1989 rejected the message of Jeff, they ended up falling 9/11, right? Because it rejection and fall. And so Jeff rejected the message, and then that's the one that falls, the one that rejects the message.
What? Say that again?
Because the leadership, we just all said the leadership rejected the message.
Right.
And so the leadership then falls in the next dispensation because they rejected the message.
Right.
And the SDA did the same thing. Everyone along the way who did the rejection, who was leadership, who rejected the message, they end up falling.
Whoa. That is a repeated pattern.
Mm-hmm. But that's why people get confused. They're like, well, if Jeff won here and Jeff won here, then Jeff should win here. And I'm like, that's not, he wasn't, it's, you have to look at the point of what was being rejected and who was playing what part to understand, because you have a message that's being rejected all along the way, and the message is the issue. And so whoever rejects the message here, that's who falls here.
Wow.
But the lesson, a valuable lesson to ponder is what causes that to happen in somebody. Because if we don't ponder that thought in our own personal experience here, it could be us. What causes it? What causes us to come to a point and reject the message of God?
That's what I brought up in the study this morning. Why did the 70 disciples leave?
I told you this study was going to interlink with a lot of what you just taught. I saw it coming.
Why would it? Because that link of the 126 was pretty clear that Sister Tess was pointing out what Parminder did. It was a really clear line that 2014 would have been something.
Yeah.
And Jeff has been known to base things off smaller little, it's 9 o'clock and 11 minutes, this is important. Little things like that. So why wouldn't you take something biblical like 126 mini tekel, bam, 2014?
I think it's something.
So what causes you to reject that?
I think it's something more personal and internal.
Yeah, exactly.
No, because he was holding to the Laodicean
Yeah.
Yeah, that too.
errors.
What'd she say?
Tony,
Holding on to Laodicean errors.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you want to bring the Sabbath into this, we can go to 1844. It's a rejection of the Sabbath by the movement leadership and the disappointment of those trying to introduce it. So if you're going to see a disappointment in our history, you're going to see it at 2012, not at 2019. So there is one message. The symbols we use for that. This is the growth of the message of time. But when we say a time, we've already said there are 3 elements to the midnight cry. And I didn't bring that with me. Well, I do have it in the binder, but 3 elements. There's the date and how we got to that date, and to leave behind our preconceived ideas. And it's really interesting because as I was putting together these studies, like I said earlier, I went back and watched, I don't remember if I said it with all of us or not. I went back and watched the first camp meeting presentation from Pillars of Our Faith with Elder Jeff. I did not notice it at the time, and I know why I didn't notice it, because in Arkansas, back in Arkansas in October, we all watched those presentations, and there was so much in there that, we all accepted, we all understood, but we didn't know the depth of it. We didn't know the meanings behind everything to get us in all these dots to connect and everything. So while the Lord pulled us all aside and put us on this, going through these classes step by step, it has really helped me. And then the studies that he's had all of us doing as a group has helped us to put together piece by piece. And in the process, the dots are being connected for each one of us individually.
Amen.
But when I watched that presentation by Elder Jeff, it became clear that there were a lot of dots he didn't have connected. He didn't understand it. Yeah. And when you watch back in the one on Romania, the Romanian ones, just recent, the one on Are We Socialists, when Jeff makes a statement, Elder Parmenter makes a statement that FFA all the way back in October had already called the messenger of the Midnight Cry a left-wing socialist. So, and I have to go back to hear how he went on to say it, because I have something possibly backwards in my head, but that the people that follow this Midnight Cry message are left-wing socialists. So I didn't even get the whole socialist part of it until the last couple of months, by going through these studies. I mean, I didn't look at it that deep to be considered a socialist. You can back up before that all happened. And I was asking John about this, Brother Jonathan, because I couldn't remember when we did the studies, when we were talking about Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton. I noticed that if you tried to, even within the movement, and you're having this discussion on Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton, that to say what you're saying about Donald Trump automatically put a blue hat on your head, which means you're a socialist. So I saw that connection that way, but I never saw it necessarily from watching now what Parmenter said. And then you go back in one of the presentations, and I don't remember which one, in Germany, Tess actually says something very similar, that they were labeled socialists way back in October when the message first came out.
We're still technically, we kind of do have some ideals of socialism, which is not a bad thing.
But the thing is, it's kind of a moot point, because how many of us were conservative before this message came out? Probably 99% of us.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's not like we were all along these left-wing socialists that were just waiting for this message to come along. This tested every one of us.
Yep. So, back to the red hat, blue hat thing, I never even thought about it as conservative socialism. I just thought Democrat or Republican, you're automatically labeled a Democrat if you're going to speak and say these truths that are happening prophetically towards Donald Trump.
Amen.
And it wasn't about we're wearing a red hat or a blue hat. We're wanting to understand prophecy and be in God's kingdom.
Yeah, but
where there's neither red or blue hat.
Like Tyler was saying, they made the establishment a dirty word.
Yes.
And so they made socialist left-wingers a dirty idea.
Yep.
So now if you're labeled that, you're automatically some kind of evil villain, whereas it's the complete opposite, actually.
Liberals always been labeled as the dirty one. And I mean, however liberal you want to be looked upon as, you were, I'm just saying, in Adventism, where you have Capital City Church versus Southgate, or where you have Central Church versus other churches. You have that this church is more conservative than this church. So, we don't want to go to that church. And so you have different churches that serve people flavor or what they want to like or whatever.
Isn't that crazy?
And their ideas of what the message should be about,
I definitely chose a conservative church.
Yeah.
And we always thought, they're a conservative church, they're more biblical based, they're the better one. But no, the ones who were for equality were the more biblical ones.
Well, actually, in that
they had some crazy, with the music things.
Yeah, and in that context, because they were like, we can eat whatever, you can eat that meat, and then
I didn't think I was a safe environment to be around.
No, none of us did.
I don't think that we can say, I don't know, maybe we have to be careful about saying that the liberal church was more biblical. I think that because God pulled all the people in this movement, they had to come through the conservative line to get to where we are right now.
Yeah.
So I think there was issues in both churches, but God knew that the conservatives were going to be strict to the word, and that they'd maybe be easier to show these things because they'd be studying prophecy, whereas the liberals aren't studying prophecy.
Yeah, I agree. They weren't more biblical. They were loose and liberal. They just have a better opportunity of
better principle. I don't know.
I just wonder, my question is, from all of this, is where the transition actually happened. Because for most of us, I was raised in a conservative home, but there was, things that, each individual, though they're raised up a certain way or they're around a certain environment, let's say conservative environment, they have their own individual walk with God. So some things they agree with some things they don't. So I'm just wondering where that whole transition came into, where we let go, or we're even willing to let go of those conservative ideas or thoughts to embrace this message. Like, or
I still think it goes back to listening to some of the presentations that so many people had a hard time listening to, that it was the preparation work. If you understand the agricultural model and how the Lord works, he plows the heart. How does he plow the heart? Well, at least on us, on the internal. On the external, he's plowing them through external events, right? But he's plowing us through his word. So we were receiving a plowing, and when you receive a plowing, you're prepared to receive its seed.
Yeah.
And when you receive the seed, right, it gets watered, and it's nurtured and grows and develops.
Amen. Amen. And that does explain the new birth experience, or the Holy Spirit, because we don't know when it happens, or conversion, we don't know when it happens. It just,
Yeah.
When you're done, I just want to say something really short. It's just a really small testimony, and I don't even know if it applies. But even before I came to the church, I didn't really know about the Democrats and Republicans. I did know that once I did vote once, and I did vote Democrat because everyone in our family and everyone I knew was Democratic except for my brothers in the military. But it was when I became in the church, and it was and I don't think I became conservative because of being a conservative. I only became conservative from the way the Lord had changed me. And not only I wasn't changed still into a voting thing, I was changed into doing better for myself because the Lord had shown me how, before I would never pick up my clothes. I would always sleep. I did everything wrong. And I knew that, and then I realized that, you need to earn what you don't, nothing's for free. You have to work for what you want, whereas the other sides, they want to give a lot of free stuff. So that is the only reason why all those elements is the only reason why I became a conservative person. But I don't think I was ever in a political side.
Yeah. Well, we'll finish up here. So we got quite a few slides to go through, but in 2012, we see that it's rejected. So we need the message of time to know the time of our close of probation. We need to know that we're priests, and to know that we're priests, we need to know that we have a close of probation first. So we had to know in order to know who we are, we had to have the message of time. So we had to have the battles of Raphia, had to have the battles of Raphia and Panium to demonstrate our close of probation. Even if it doesn't look directly related to a date, understanding that there's a waymark at Raphia gives us our date. It's a key part of that development, which is given at Concord or 2016. And I believe 2016, and that is when they were in Holland, right? When Daniel 11 began to be unsealed and where he got Raphia and Panium. I'm pretty sure that was 2016. Let's see, this is all the development of our loud cry, but builds this waymark. First of all, the introduction of time. Then we have understanding of priests, Levites, and Nethinims. Then we have a king of the south and the king of the north. And we must go through all those steps before we can finally place a date on the timeline. It is one message connected throughout this history that gives us October 22nd in our time. But you can take this for more than one history. Take this for more than one history, or from more than one history, not just the Millerites. We said before we can do 1844 to 1850. And if you do 1844 to 1850, the Sabbath was not something they had in their prior history. We have more than one history that bears weighting on our line, which makes our reform line both more complicated and more simple at the same time, and much more interesting. Another question. We marked 2014 as Sunday law. It's not midnight. 2014 for us is midnight and Sunday law here. Where's midnight on our reform line? 2014 is both Sunday law and midnight. Yes, and she answers correct. So they're starting to get it. And I look at it, I look at my own self. Where was I coming through this? It's like, this was really complicated. So imagine the students that were in this class, they're probably far well advanced than us because they went through this months ago. Where's my mouse here? There we go. Oh, there's my little storyline one that I was trying to put together.
So cool. I like that.
Trying to figure out how to demonstrate it, what it seems like to me. So another question, I like to highlight the Millerites become a story or a history. So their history is a story.
Yeah.
We know that when it takes place, then it's not something literal. I don't know if that's something blocking. Okay, so it's not something literal what's going on, but it becomes a parable. Then Samuel Snow can't be a single person, something different. As you said, 2014 was the beginning of the understanding. They just developed until 2019. To highlight the fact that the Millerite history is a parable, so everything in the parable is not so straightforward all the time. That's what Parminder taught us. They have implications. The parable itself, Matthew 25, the virgins rise at midnight. But in real life, we know that it takes time for thousands of people to wake up, and that's the swelling of the midnight cry. That was one of the students talking there. So in Acts 27, everyone on board that ship makes it. So how I would word what you're saying is we compare and contrast. We compared it, but we also contrasted. And if you contrast, there's differences, which is why you need more than one parable. And this was Elder Marco. We have two waymarks for 2014, and I want you to explain that better. So he's seeing it as two waymarks, Sunday law
and midnight.
And midnight. She said, because it's midnight for the priests, and it's also Sunday law for them. Chess says, I'm a little confused because I see Sunday law as midnight. So it's not one or the other, but Sunday law itself is a symbol of midnight and July 21st. And going back to what we started to say earlier, just in case there's confusion on it, if you go to Great Controversy, chapter 38, that's the structure to work with. Is that you have a Sunday law first, right? Then you have an increase of a loud cry that swells into a loud cry, and then a shut door. So that structure is what goes on each of these lines for priests, Levites, and Nethinims, so that it goes down the line. So the line prior to the loud cry always begins with Sunday law, right? But we were able to line up Sunday law we were able to line up 2014 as Sunday law for us based on that structure, okay? But based on that structure, you go then to the parable of the 10 virgins, and you have it's midnight, and then you also have that it's midway when the virgins are woken up. So midway 2014 becomes that midway point between 2 points, okay? And that's what we're going to go on to see is what those 2 points are. So
just to refresh, midway is not midnight, or midnight is
midway and midnight are the same thing.
Yeah, that's what I got.
Yeah, they're the same thing.
Sure. Yeah.
So Elder Marco says the symbol or the application, there must be a line of a symbol, there must be a line of the dates, and there must be a line of the application. The test says the dates are July 21, August 15th, October 22nd, or 2014, 2018, 2019. But we also have midnight, midnight cry, close of probation. They each stand for the same thing. For those same things. So Sunday law is midnight, which is 2014. For us, it's not the Sunday law that begins for the world. So I was trying to find a way to put what I see it in my mind is all these frames of a film, and they're a story or a line. And when you put all the stories or a line together, then you watch it as a movie and you see it all connected. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes it. It's like what we said this morning. So you have your movie, and you have each, what you want to call it, frame. So you have 1, 2, 3. There you go. There's your line. You know, your movie is your line, the way the message is being conveyed through the movie, and it's going all throughout the line, right?
Yeah.
So you see that.
And so, like, we've read books, watched movies, various things in our past and such. my mind went to one movie that I can't remember the title of, so I'll leave that one out. But then also a movie that was a book that I read and watched the movie, but this was years ago. I would not do it now. But years ago, when the movie, Stephen King movie, The Stand, came out, I read it, right? So if anybody else had read it, you can see that there was all these stories, all these people's lives, right? All these people's lives. And I don't know if this is a right application or whatever, right thought to try to compare it to, but all these people's lives are all connected and they all come to one point. And they all, and so you got the same theme, so to speak, going on throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, the author uses the characters to convey the theme.
Yes.
So, yeah.
So you've got all these different, so we've got all these stories in the Bible, and all these, the structure is the same always in all of throughout these stories.
Right.
So when you take all of these stories and you line them one on top of another and you look at it, it plays a movie that gives you the overall theme of the entire movie, which is salvation.
Yeah.
Well,
That's the
everlasting
gospel. Yeah.
Yeah. So the reason we went into this to begin with was to see July 21st or 2014 as midnight or midway. That's the main point. We want to come to understand that 2014 is midnight or midway, because there's more to learn on. And this is where I didn't have all these dots connected. I mean, I got it from watching this presentation, that presentation, but they weren't connected to tell me the overall story. So 2014, it's midnight through the parable of the 10 virgins. It's midway because it's the middle of 2 points, right? And then it's Sunday law, because you take Great Controversy chapter 38 to get that structure of midnight cry, close of probation.
Okay, so let me
Sunday law, loud cry, close of probation.
So just to clarify in my own mind that I'm understanding what you just said, it's a midway because it's a literal midpoint between two things.
Right.
It's midnight because you have the parable of the virgins as that whole parable of the virgins.
When they awoke.
Yeah, when they awoke. And then you have it as a Sunday law because when you go, the structure of the Great Controversy chapter 38 points it as midnight.
As Sunday law.
Oh, as
Sunday law.
That's what I meant.
Loud cry, close of probation.
Yeah, it defines midnight, right?
Right.
Through the Great Controversy.
Right.
In the structure that it provides in chapter 38. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Did everybody follow that? And actually, I have that up here. Well, it's kind of on down here, anyways, but I have it up here. This was paralleling the line of the 144,000. You have Sunday law, August 11th, and then Exeter, and then you have the close of probation. But you go into the, I don't have the Great Controversy one up there, sorry. The references are here, you can look at it. But from in the Great Controversy, chapter 38, you'll see that it's Sunday law. So taking those different points and bringing them together, but the important thing is to be able to establish that, and I think about my own dull senses here, the whole point was to be able to move forward on what is midway now. So because we need to understand what is midway. So we needed to understand that 2014 was midway so that we can go forward and see that midway 2014 is a midpoint between 2 points, okay? So between April 19 and October 22nd, midway. So 2014, not literally, but symbolically becomes midway between 9/11 and 2019. So you have 9/11 here and 2019. That's not literal. It's not actual like it was precise in the Millerite history, but it's midway symbolically between 9/11 and the close of probation. We'll see why that's important as we go forward. So 2014 must also be midnight or midway. April 19, 1844 was the tarrying time, where we mark the tarrying time on our reform line. That was 9/11. Remember, this is a parable. The dates aren't literal now. Now it becomes symbolic. So on April 19th, you have the arrival of the second angel's message. So it's 9/11 or 2001. So 2014 is midnight or midway symbolically between 9/11 and 2019. And we're going to see that Midway, it's a turning point as well. It's a turning point. So between 9/11 and 11/9, interesting, huh?
Yeah.
The reason we're studying this was to place that structure, to get that structure into place. We need to see that 2014 is Midway, a time period that begins at 9/11 and ends at 2019, the tearing to the shut door. So you have 9/11, the tearing all the way to the shut door, and this marks a midpoint. The reason we wanted to build that structure, because we're going to go backwards and placing the time prophecies that took us to 2014 in the first place. So this would be going back to 2012 in the studies that brought us to 2014. We started today's study by showing the 126 and the 151. As we began to look at it in our last study, the 151 takes us back to 1863. So you've got this 151, and this was understood long before we have come to know it, that 1863 and 151, which is a symbol of the 2520, brought you to 2014. We also know that there's 1863 to 1989. That's another story, but we're looking at the 151 here. So this is one of the structures that was put in place to predict 2014. The 151 was put in place to predict 2014. But you can mark these two numbers, 126 and 151. 1863 is the midpoint, midway between the American Civil War. So 1863 right here is midway between 1861 and 1865, the duration of the Civil War. 1863 marks midway. So you have a midpoint here and you have a midpoint here connected by a symbol of the 2520. You follow that? So when we discussed Acts 27 in 1863, and it goes off course. You know, the Acts 27 and the ship goes off course. The internal and the external both go off course. The Civil War began in 1861 and ended in 1865. What's the first thing we observe about this when we look at the structure? In this history here, there's 2 years and 2 years in between. Do you see that? So you have a midpoint, you got 2 years, and you have 2 years.
And that's for what is that for?
The American Civil War.
Yes. Okay.
The American Civil War. At the time of Lincoln, the time of that first Republican president, right? Okay, that's all becomes key as we continue to go forward. So let's see, it's a midway between the Civil War. So this light we bring into the history of 2001 to 2018. What do we begin to understand? What is 2014? 2014, because it's connected here by the 151, which is a symbol of the 2520, it's connected by a midway point, taking us over here to 2014, then that would mean 2014 is a midway point.
So she basically just took she took 2014 and did the prophetic number 151, and it took her to 1863, where she saw that was also a midway point in that history. Wow.
Yeah. So seeing this was a midway.
So that gives you two.
So seeing this was a midway told us by the connection of the 151, which is a symbol of 2520, takes you to 2014 as marking 2014 as midway.
Yeah.
Midway between what? Okay, well, we've already kind of said it, but midway between 2 points. So midway of 1861 to 1865 is the history of the Civil War. Seeing 1863, the history of the Civil War is midway, shows us that 2014 is midway in our Civil War. Now we don't have one date to work off, we have all 3. So midway between, so we have 3 dates here, right? These 3 dates, and then now we're gonna have our 3 dates here. We're gonna have this one here, and we'll see it as we continue to go forward, what is midway. But this is our Civil War.
Well, when so you're saying 9/11, 2014, 2019 is our Civil War. Okay. I just have to say that because there's a whole lot of numbers in there. So I just want to make.
Yeah.
Okay.
Want me to back up?
I want to.
So you have midway between 9/11 and 2019. Symbolically, remember.
Right.
Because it's not going to be exact.
I think Sister Christine.
Somebody going to say something?
Yeah, I realize that's symbolic, and I realize it's coming from Tess, but I just wanted to point this out, that if you go back to 2009, which would be 10 years, which would be literal midpoint, 2014, that 2009 is the year Parminder brought out the videos, or that he created the videos, the 2520 revealed.
Yep.
Amen.
Yep.
That, wow, this is just, wow.
Which you need the 2520. The 2520 is what brings time into the movement. Although time was all the way back in 1989, you understood what I said. It's going to open up the message of time.
Well, what are we saying? It's 2009 before?
2009 is when he did the presentations on the 2520 revealed.
Is when it's 2009 signifies the moment time was introduced as movement, even though it was way back. It started at the time of the end. But 2009 is a significant point in our history.
In the 2520.
Yes, because it's time. It's when Parminder, Elder Parminder did the series on.
So 2014 is between 2009 and 2019?
No. Sister Christine.
Christine said, I think she's talking about it being 10 years after 9/11.
No. 2014 is the literal midpoint between 2009 and 2019.
Okay. 2009 and 2019. 2014 is the literal midpoint between those two dates.
2009 and 2019.
Yeah, it is. Okay, got it.
Yes. 2014 is the literal midpoint.
So now we're going to go on to the literal symbolic issue here that they're going to struggle with. So when we say there's a civil war, it's also symbolic in 2014. I think it becomes how we interpret prophecy. If there was a prophet in the history of World War II, and she said there was going to be World War III, would we be content to see that application as nearly completed? Because we also need to understand what those prophecies mean. The mode of warfare in their time becomes airplanes and tanks, machine guns and gases. We don't bring their mode of warfare into our history as literal. When we say that, we're in the history of World War II and it's nearly over. Are we content with that application or understanding? There are struggles that are going on in the group there between understanding literal and symbolic. It's not an issue of literal versus symbolic. It's defining what it looks like in our time.
Amen. Can I say something?
Yeah.
Because back in that history, the history of our time becomes a symbol for us. And that's what they weren't understanding, is that the history of their time, of time previous, becomes a symbol, a parable, a symbol that we can use to illustrate what is happening in our time. So it's not, so you can't go take everything that happened literally back then into our time, because it's not going to happen that way. It's just symbolically, it's just symbolic to what our history will look like.
And now she happens to mention the mode of warfare in there, that because how did we get the mode of warfare? How do we come to what we got to from elephants? Because I know many of us, our minds went immediately to elephants or Republicans. But the purpose was that the elephants were a new mode of warfare. That's what they represented, was a new mode of warfare. So we would come to us, I don't know, could you guys hear that fan when she turned it on, or is it okay to turn it on? Yeah, you got something smoking in there.
I do not hear it.
Yeah, you can turn it on if you want. They didn't hear it.
Or we could catch on fire and you guys could hear us. Hear the alarms go off. That'll be very loud.
So what the elephants represented, it wasn't that the elephants represent the Republicans. It was that the elephants were a new mode of warfare. So we carried that idea into us as a new mode of warfare. And the new mode of warfare in our war is information warfare. So it's not the elephants being Republican. Okay, so there's struggles between it's not an issue of literal versus symbolic. It's defining what it looks like in our time. When we look at the Civil War, or jump ahead in our studies, forget the Civil War, let's look at the French Revolution. It begins with one type of government and ends with another type of government. That's the definition of a civil war or revolution. So it begins with one type of government and it's going to transition to another time. If it's successful, it's change in the leadership or government. I wouldn't say it becomes a literal or symbolic, but the processes by which that occurs are not necessarily the same. So it may take a different method, different mode of warfare, but the purpose is to take it from one form of government to another. And let's see. So in our history, we're in the history of persecution, and I'm not sure I followed what she was saying here. The history of persecution and the history of the Holocaust. So we need to understand that these mean what these mean in our time.
So she's saying that in those previous histories, the persecution of what it looked like at that time.
And in the Holocaust and what it looked at
Yeah,
that time.
exactly.
What
we
is
need
it
to
in
know
our
what,
time?
yeah, how to apply that to our time, what that means for us.
So are we content to see first of all that we are in that history, and then are we content to see what that looks like or means to us? Some people have already said in other places on video that this cannot be civil war or revolution because enough people haven't died. Civil war and revolution must mean a lot of death and bloodshed. Our issue with that is how we're defining those histories, and that that is one of our biggest problems in this movement, thinking that we can't be in civil war because there's no bloodshed.
Well, if you're thinking in terms of mind-on-mind warfare, the mindset that have been changed is enough bloodshed.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Amen.
And that is bloodshed, because you're causing eternal
spiritual death.
eventually
Exactly.
spiritual death.
Amen.
So there can be a tendency to say, okay, this is acceptable, but we don't change our way of study. And we say, just wait till Panium and then it'll be a hot war. So there's those that are kind of accepting along the way. This is what gets people out. They claim to accept it. And as Elder Parmenter said in one of the messages that he had sent back to me, is that there were people that even said that they never accepted the midnight cry. And when they were asked why, what did he say? They never accepted the midnight cry. And why did they say? Because there was no place else to go. Well, now they have some place to go, FFA. So there's people that are still in this movement not accepting that it's not going to be a hot war. And so they're going to come up to a test where that eventually is going to shut their door, because it's going to cause a problem with them that they can't proceed forward. So, and just wait till Sunday law, and we're going to have plantations and slavery back, because that's another topic here, is are we going to have literal slavery? And I really believe the bigger picture of this whole slavery is God is delivering his people. He's setting captives free from oppression. Because when they were in Egypt making bricks without straw, he heard their cries going up. You take that outside of yourself and your own Christian walk and what we understand, take it and look at the countries and even in America, you've got homeless people all over the place. The cries are reaching up to God. The oppression. What does James tell us was where he says, woe to the rich men? He's answering, if I'm understanding it correctly, James is telling us what it's all about. The rich versus the poor and the oppression that the poor are under. And the cries are going out to God. And when those cries reach out, he's going to come and he's going to deliver his people. So there's those that are going to be waiting for Sunday law to come and think that there's going to be plantations and slavery. And it's not that kind of slavery. The issue is how we're defining history in our time, which causes us to think, it causes us to have unrealistic expectations of what this looks like. This is the overturning of the U.S. government, the placement of a dictator, which is a civil war or revolution. So this here, from 9/11 to close of probation, it is the overturning of the U.S. government, the placement of a dictator through civil war or revolution. But what we're looking for is this bloodshed, this kind of hot war mentality. We're saying it doesn't occur in these histories the way we've expected it to. It's not going to happen in the near future either. So we're going to see in the next study after lunch how it connects to church and state, and what role that the union of church and state plays in this war and what it's causing. So when we say the invasion of Poland is 2016, and that's war on the Western Front, there's no history here or future where Trump is going to build up an army and launch an invasion. War on the Western Front is demonstrated is demonstrating just his election and he attacks his own country. That's war on the Western Front. The election and him attacking his own country. It's not a literal application or a symbolic application. It's one application, but it becomes how we apply history in our time, like the history of World War II. So perhaps this is a good example when we look at World War II and the invasion of Poland. We don't say there's going to be an invasion of Poland today. We say it's symbolic and involves the US government and all of that. But then we go to 1863 and the Civil War, and we say that there's an actual civil war going on, but just in a different format than 2014. So there's still this confusion between taking that literal history and making the application in our time. So there is an invasion in 2016, but it looks different. You could say that the invasion of Poland becomes a symbol. We're needing to have some consistency with our application. We're pushing it more strongly because the issues people have had is with making this history of civil war based purely on what they're observing externally. Then instead of learning from these histories and saying this is how we apply history, we want to make raffia an invasion or in a hot war. We need to have one consistent method with how we're seeing the future based on history.
Amen.
That was it, I guess. I didn't think we'd make it. So, any questions or comments? The next study is going to continue on that thought, going into In God We Trust, which really helped me connect church and state to all of this and what has been going on and what this war is really all about. Nobody? You go ahead.
Oh, I thought someone said
Yeah, but my thought is still formalizing.
You said too.
Oh, yeah, no, I've got it. I wanted to show something on something completely unrelated. So if there's questions related to that, go for it.
I'm just gonna say again because my thought is.
Go ahead, Johnson. Go ahead, Brother Johnson.
I just wanted to show you guys something that a friend showed me this morning in a prayer meeting kind of thing, a Zoom prayer meeting. I'll just share a screen. I did it really quickly this way because I'd explain it wrong if I didn't. So we all know this verse, right?
Yes.
There's neither Jew nor Greek. There is neither bond nor free. There is neither male nor female. You are all one in Christ Jesus. When Christ said this, oh, hang on. Gotta move you, Tony. You're in my way. No, it's okay. It's okay. You're all right. So when Christ said this, he was dealing with the situation between Jews and Greeks. So in Christ's dispensation, Christ was focusing on distinguishing between these two groups. Bond nor free, when Christ decided to deal with that, was in 1863 in the Millerite dispensation, and slavery was the issue. And then we have the third one, male or female, which is being dealt with in our age.
Oh.
They're actually all in order of how God decided to deal with them, and we're living in this last one with inequality. So she showed me that, and I was like, well, that's actually pretty cool. Like that, it's interesting that it's in that order. But then when you think about it, it's a chiasm, because the first sin of all these things that had happened was in the garden, where God put females in subjection to male. So the last of the three was the first of the three that actually came into the world. Then slavery came into the world, and then there's a distinguishing between Jew or Greek when God created a Jewish nation. So there's actual chiasm in how it's actually all being dealt with, not like a two-way chiasm almost.
And that just demonstrated in that brief presentation, that just demonstrated line upon line and how you understand new information or create new information for our time to understand new light. And what she just did, that I forget what you actually, she did that, what do you call that? I'm gonna, hold on, I have to go in here real quick.
Also understanding the mind of God.
Yeah, like he does everything in the right order. Like, it's not an accident that he said these things in this order, because they're actually dealt with in the same order.
Yeah.
Amazing. Anyway, little tidbit.
Praise the Lord. She's looking something up, and then we'll pray and break
That
her
was
line.
pretty cool.
Okay. Can everyone see this? This is what she did. This structure, it's a roll. She took the Bible verse, and then you can divide that verse and create line upon line. It's a formula and method of how you do line upon line.
Oh, yeah.
So that's what I don't know what you call it, but I just call it like a formula.
If you go back up to your main one where it shows the lines and all the threads, the one that you were showing us earlier,
Okay.
that one there, it's doesn't it have a verse by verse or word by word? So the very first one, the sentence.
Oh yes, this one.
Yeah. So you have well, I guess each word has its own meaning, or it could be the
Own parable.
storyline. Either way.
Yeah. And that makes me, because if we can get to this, there's a verse that if we can apply this and just practice doing it, then we can become familiar. It's like a math problem where there's so many formulas and you just plug in the information on how to figure it out. And then the more you do it, the better you get at it.
Amen.
So if you can find for this example, Elder Parmenter took Numbers 24, verse 17, and he broke up that verse in his presentation. I didn't see the actual presentation where he did that, but he reviewed it in another presentation and showed how he did it. And so if we can do that with the verse and just plug it in and kind of figure out how to go from there, then we can kind of use it to figure out new light. I don't know if that makes sense.
I like the idea of doing it real time and us trying to work through something as simple as just even one verse.
Yeah, so that can be probably the next time we meet when we continue the study. But that's what that's what she did. I just wanted to point that out. This is what she used.
Yeah, exactly. Cool.
Well, good study. I pray we're all growing in the understanding of the midnight cry message. So who do we have? Who prayed last time? Was that Victor? Maybe Brother Jonathan will pray? Yeah, Brother Jonathan.
Sure. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we just want to thank you so much for your presence here with us and for all that you're revealing to us, Lord, not only through your word, but through the lines of history and through your methodology that you had created in the foundations of our entire existence, Lord, as we see it strung through all the histories and through all the and through the Bible and through the spirit of prophecy, Lord, through all the words that are written. It's amazing to us, and we're so thankful that you're patient enough to unveil these things to us in such a seemingly slow manner so that we can actually understand and grasp it, Lord. We know that you do not pour so much on us that is above what we can handle, and but you also push us to strive, Lord. So I thank you for all the blessings that you give us, Lord, for the discernment and for the unity in this group of people, Lord, to help each other to learn and to study and to teach. And Lord, I just pray that you'll continue to work with us and to help us, Lord, as we approach November 9th. We know that there's so much more that we still need to understand, and that each one of us is a body part and we all have a function. We're all important, Lord, and that you have a purpose for each one of us. I pray that each one of us will strive to fulfill that purpose, Lord. And so as we go on the rest of the day, I ask, Lord, that you would please bless each one here, bless the meals that we're going to eat. I pray that you'll bless the hands that prepared them. And Lord willing, we will all be able to return back and to continue on in our studies on the Sabbath. We thank you, Father, and we pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.